Is Wizard101 worth playing in 2025? Y'all, this is a question that I've been getting a lot. I think there's a serious uptick of people that want to either re-enter into the game after a long break, or they're looking at the stuff they're doing in PvP and want to try it out. And I thought I'd make a more objective video about why I think 2025 is going to be a very special year for the game. I said something very similar last year, and I don't think that I was wrong. 2024 featured an amazing winter update, new features like spell fusion, an entire retexture of an old world, and that's just the most recent update. The 2024 was not, but I wouldn't have recommended playing in 2024 as much as I would now because of something that I've noticed that's been evolving over the past few years. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the increasing divide, and something that's an increasing source of criticism for a lot of people, the divide between PvE and PvP players in the game. I think for the majority of people that play this game, the game looks like this. You enchant a spell that can hit everybody and you call it a day, quest through as much as you can with max damage. And while that formula worked very well and was even like somewhat challenging, right? It wasn't just as simple as just AoEing for most of the game. As our stats got better and better, they needed to do something to make the game at least have some sort of variety. I think that's exactly why they started adding completely new features like Arch Mastery, Spellements, Spell Fusion. And while for someone like me that's really exciting, I could totally see why that many changes, especially the sheer number of Spellements that they've added, literally one for every single world, multiple lore spells where they can do crazy things like clear, gambit, conditional. I could see why that would be very overwhelming for most people. And maybe that would have been good enough reason to just chill and not play the game until things kind of settle down a little bit. Well, I'm here to tell you guys, I have a very good feeling that 2025 is going to be much more about purely new content and auditing previous things. We've reached the point where all kinds of things like hit and stuns and spells and treasure cards that do way more damage, even main deck spells that do stuff that's outside of your identity, most of those have been either PvP banned or replaced with something else that fits the school identity that they're building more. This year, they did a bunch of things that make it, in my opinion, a lot easier for people just to understand how the game works, especially in alignment with the new vision the devs are building. Right, you have little things like blade removal being, taken from Storm in PvP anyways and being moved over to Ice and Depth. And now there's very few exceptions to the idea that, every school can leverage a few hanging effects and counter a couple of them. I think that internal symmetry, without it, it actually made the game hard to understand because you not only have to understand what the school identity that they're building is, you also had to know the exceptions because of old legacy spells breaking those, identities. And beyond just, changing the school of things and like, moving things around, this year was phenomenal in terms of just balancing the game. Drains were doing like 33% more than they should have in PvP, and now they've been reeled back to normal, and now Death is just as competitive as any other school. They got rid of Mana Burn, they got rid of Supernova, they capped heals. Almost anything obnoxious from, I guess what you would call old PvP has now been either reined back a little bit or at least balanced to the point where every school is actually competitive. I don't think every school has been competitive like this in an extremely long time. There are still broken things here and there, but at least you're not extremely punished for the school that you choose. And even if you are on a bad school, you could always use another school to fill in your weaknesses, and you know where to go to fill in those weaknesses. I think school identity is solidifying, and it's also more and more obvious every update where you go for what. Like, if you want a certain spell to do something, you kind of know where to start, and I think that's a good thing. It's gotten to the point where whether you do PvP or not, if you actually, look at the spells and what they do, you'll actually have a very good idea of what this new school identity that they're building is. And I'm a really big believer that even when things get complicated, as long as they aren't changing in a way that's hard to keep up with, I think people are on board with just trying new stuff, because why not? What's the harm in that? So if you see all these like symbols and auras and gambits and clears and you feel intimidated by them, while nothing's really gonna change with that specifically, I can most certainly assure you that this year compared to any other year, it'll be easier to keep up with changes because the pace of things that completely change about the way your school is played, it's just slowing down. I really think that Wiz is getting closer and closer to a point where it's not just about fixing past mistakes, and it's about just adding new stuff that can make the game better and better. This isn't to say that there'll be less ambitious updates or that there aren't problems to solve. I think there are quite massive issues, especially with the barrier of entry for creating complicated setups. I still think all forms of advanced content, right? We're talking raids, challenge mode, PvP. I still think all of those lack the ability for everyone to participate. I've kind of like seen the reasoning from the devs like in the Discord before about how it's not really intended for everybody. And while that could be true, sometimes I do feel like they put out content that maybe 5% of the player base will enjoy, when really it should be like closer to 50, you know? But I feel like I want to get to the point where a raid comes out and it feels accessible to 50% of the player base, not 5. And spell elements. While I think it's grossly exaggerated how important spell elements are, I think if you get 75 spell elements for any spell, you're good, and that's actually not hard for most spells. I do think we need more ways to get these so that people feel like they have an easier intro to them than having to go out of their way to find the drop source for them and farm it endlessly. And things like spell fusion, which is a completely new feature, while I think that they're amazing in advanced content, probably the best part of this update in terms of advanced content because it makes the next move so unpredictable sometimes. While that's great, I think there's a severe lack of helpful fusions that you could use outside of advanced content. The divide between PvP and PvE, I would say, has been just as large from the beginning of 2024 to the end. But I don't think I can say that about this upcoming year because they've done so much of the heavy lifting. Whether it's been overwhelming or not, I do think the majority of the nutty ass changes that we've all had to keep up with, I think they're going to slow down and we're going to get back to a more stable game. And that's something that I'm personally like very excited for. I think the biggest highlight of this upcoming year is definitely going to be the console release. We don't really have that much confirmation on exactly how this is going to work, even though there has been speculation that crossplay will not be allowed. Meaning if someone plays on a console, they won't be able to interact with someone like me that's playing on a PC. While that is annoying, to see Wizard101 on a bunch of different devices like PlayStation and the Nintendo Switch, the fact that all of that is probably happening in 2025, it should really give people, you know, calm when you hear people saying that the game is dying or it's on the downhill. I think not only is it better poised for more players to try out new stuff this year than ever before, but more players are going to have access to this game than ever before simply because they're going to be rolling this out to all kinds of different platforms. Hopefully this doesn't come off too optimistic because some people will have a serious issue with that for some reason. But I'm genuinely and honestly telling y'all that I'm enjoying PvP way more now than I did last year. I think Wallaroo and Selenopolis were both really W updates. I think they were ambitious and they actually got it done. And while yes, there have been many mistakes made along the way and there will be many more, I think it's hard to argue that Wiz isn't learning from those mistakes pretty much every single time they put out something. Sometimes they create new problems, but I think they're getting better at solving them. Hopefully this is like a good summary of, I don't know why I think this year is going to be different. I kind of did something, it's very similar to last year and I was actually pretty accurate. I did say 2024 would be more about just the number and breadth of updates. And genuinely, I think this year is just going to be more about really figuring out where the direction of this game is going to be going in a more solid route now that so much of their heavy lifting is done. And I think that's going to bring a lot of people together and let them try totally new features that they've never really tried before. That would be my dream for this game this year. That's what I'm hoping will happen. But I'd love to hear y'all's 2025 wish list and why you think someone should or shouldn't keep playing Wiz in 2025. Let me know in the comments. Drop a like if you enjoyed. Leave a sub if you're new. And as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome, y'all. See y'all soon. And yeah.